Welcome, Ranjit. So our next speaker is Ranjit Padinateri from Biosciences of IIT Bombay. And so without wasting the time, let's see what he has to talk. So Ranjit, the screen is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Dibjyoti. I'm going to talk about physical models to understand chromatin assembly and inheritance of epigenetic information. So I have two parts. So I'll try to see if there is time permits. I will discuss the first part, second part. Otherwise, I'll just end with the first part. So let me just try to change the slide. The slide is changing now.
Yes, it is changing. It is changing.
So as you all know, DNA is the molecule that contains the genetic code. It contains the code for all the cellular processes. And if you take a organism like any multicellular organism or like human beings, we have different cell types. And even though, so as you know, we all started from a single cell, divided and developed into a multicellular organism. So therefore, we start from one cell and the DNA is copied multiple times. So all our different cell types have exactly the same DNA essentially. So cells in our skin and cells in our eye have essentially the same DNA. But even though they have the same DNA, they function very differently. And why do they function differently? Essentially, it'll turn out that this is because the chromatin in these different cells are in different states. They are assembled and organized differently, and they have different microstates and macrostates. So we have different cell types, and chromatin is organized differently in these different cell types, and they are in different states, and therefore they function differently, as a result, they express different sets of genes. Now, what is chromatin? Chromatin is essentially DNA plus protein. As you can see in the cartoon on the left-hand side, the yellow curve is the cartoon form of DNA, which is wrapped around many proteins. These blue proteins are histone proteins, octamer of histone proteins, and this DNA wrapped around this is called nucleosomes. And you can see that, so this is chromatin, and the chromatin can be packed in different ways. At the top, you see that chromatin is kind of loosely packed, and at the bottom, you see that the chromatin is packed more tightly. So you can organize chromatin differently. And along the DNA, you can see red dots, which are some kind of chemical marks on the DNA. And also on the protein, the histone protein, you see some flags, red flags and green flags, kind of representing chemical marks, like they are called histone modifications on the protein as well. So there is different, so basically chromatin is a long heterogeneous polymer with heterogeneous interactions. And due to this protein binding and all these chemical modifications, the state of the chromatin can have different microstates and macrostates. And it's an interesting question to define and understand these states and what are these states and which states are important for biological processes. One thing that we know, one macrostate that is important is the 3D distance between different segments of chromatin. So therefore, it is an interesting question to understand how chromatin is organized in 3D. So this is one of the questions that we will be interested to, that we will discuss in this talk, that how is chromatin organized in 3D. And another question is, how is this chemical marks distributed along the DNA? What is the pattern of this chemical marks? And that will be the second part of the talk. So as a theorist, what I'm interested in is, and what I will discuss in this talk is that from the known experimental data, what can we learn about the 3D organization of chromatin? And what can we say about copying of this extra information, the information beyond the genetic code, the epigenetic information? How do they copy and what can we say about this? These are the two questions that we'll try to address. So now, how do you measure the 3D organization of chromatin? And one of the popular method in the last 1 decade or so is called chromatin conformation capture method. And in this method, what they do is the following. So you can see a cartoon of 3D organization of the chromatin, and different regions, the two different parts of the chromatin polymer would be in contact. They will be in physical proximity. So then experimentalists can add some kind of cross-linking agents, these red dots. And once you add this, they will cross-link these regions which are in contact. And once you cross-link these regions, you can use some enzymes and cut the remaining DNA and separate those segments which are cross-linked. And you can sequence them and figure out, by comparing to the existing genome, these X and Y pieces of DNA, where they are coming from the genome. And what you would find out at the end of the day is that how often X region would be in contact with Y region. So this is what you would find out, and you can represent this as a contact matrix. So what you see on the right hand side is a contact matrix from chromosome 14 in this, which is in this from Job Ducker's lab, and this is a symmetric matrix. And what this elements of this matrix shows is the probability of contact, or the frequency of how often two regions X and Y are in contact. So you can divide the chromosome, for example, into, let us say, 1 kb segments, and you can ask how often the X segment is in contact with Y segment. So that's what this matrix represents. And you can see that the red here means more often, high probability, and the white means lesser probability. And as you can see that near the diagonal, there is higher probability of contact, which suggests that chromatin is first locally folded, and then it is folded by contacting faraway regions. So then there is a much lesser but faraway contact as well. So this is what one gets from the experiments. It's a data from a population of cells, about millions of cells. And now the question is, given this experimental data, what can we say about the three-dimensional organization of the chromatin polymer itself? How do we get the three-dimensional configuration of chromatin from this contact matrix? This is a question that we will address. And one thing I want to point out, that these contact probabilities are not very high. If these contact probabilities are close to 1, we can say that, okay, I put contacts between all these regions and then I would just equilibrate. But these contact probabilities are themselves very small, often 0.1 or smaller than that. And therefore, this is a slightly tedious task. And as I will show soon, that this is an inverse problem, and I'll explain what do I mean by that. And once I have this 3D organization of the chromatin, I can ask biologically relevant questions like what is the 3D distance between two segments, like enhancer and promoters, and so on and so forth. So now, about inverse and forward problems, we all know that if we know the interaction potentials of different segments of chromatin, if I have a polymer, and if I know all the interaction potentials between all segments and all beads of a polymer, all parts of a polymer, then I can do a Monte Carlo simulation or a Brownian dynamic simulation and compute the polymer properties and including the contact matrix. So this is the forward problem. But what we want to do here is the opposite. We do not have the potentials. We do not know what are the interaction potentials between different segments of chromatin. What we know is only the contact matrix. So given the contact matrix, we want to back calculate the interaction strength between different segments of the chromatin and then say something about the 3D organization. So the inverse problem is essentially known the contact probability. We need to find the interaction strength between different segments such that the experimentally observed contact probability constraints are satisfied. So this is what we are aiming. And this is the work done by Kiran Kumari in the lab as a PhD student, working with Professor Ravi Prakash in Monash University. Kiran is a joint PhD student in the IIT Bombay Monash joint PhD program. And we developed an inverse, and it's in collaboration with Burkhard Dunberg from MPI. So we developed an inverse Brownian dynamic simulation to compute 3D organization and from a given contact matrix. So so basically, again, our aim is to start from this given experimental data and find out the 3D organization. And we'll start with a bead spring chain simple model for polymer. So a polymer chromatin is modeled as a polymer, beads connected with springs. And then we'll add attractive interaction strength between different bead pairs. So for example, these two beads, there is a red bond indicates there is some attractive interaction. This is modeled like something like an Lennard-Jones-like potential. We use slightly different potential, which has a cutoff at a very specific point beyond which the force is exactly 0. So this is called an SDK potential, but it's like an LJ Lennard-Jones-like potential. And we want to find out the parameter that we do not know the interaction strength, the epsilon, which is the strength of this interaction, which is something which we want to find out. So our aim is to find out the epsilon mu nu, which is the interaction strength between different bead pairs mu and nu. And the question is, what is the optimal epsilon mu nu value such that we get back the experimentally observed contact matrix? So this is the algorithm that we do. So we can start with random interaction strength epsilon random values. Then you compute the contact probability by doing a forward simulation. and you compare that with the experimental value. And if then you tune the epsilon strength such a way that the comparison, the difference between the reference contact probability, which is experimentally known contact probability, and the simulation, what we obtain in simulation, the comparison should be, the difference should be very small to our satisfaction, some tolerance level. And once we have this, we stop the simulation, and then that's our 3D then we can compute the 3D organization of the chromatin. So this is the basics of algorithm, and I'll be happy to discuss more details later. And once we do this algorithm, we ask a question that what is, so we can, using this algorithm, we can compute the epsilon values for different chromatin segments. So we, as an example, we do for a gene region called alpha globin gene locus. So alpha globin is a gene region that codes for hemoglobin subunit alpha 1, which is a 500 kb region on the human chromosome 16. And experimental data is available for this region. For example, this is the reference where they have done experiments for alpha globin gene locus in different cell types. For example, in this K562 cell line, the gene is supposed to be in the on state, which means the gene is red and the proteins are produced. And in another cell type, the gene is in the off state where the proteins are not produced. And these two different cell types have different chromatin organization. So you get different contact matrices. You can see that there are more red in the bottom one, which is in the off state, than the on state. And so we take these two different cell types as the input metrics, and we run the inverse Brownian dynamics simulation. And first, using this inverse Brownian dynamics method, we compute the interaction strengths between different segments, epsilon mu nu. So this is the epsilon mu nu that we get out. So this is the epsilon mu nu for the chromatin in the on state, and this is the epsilon mu nu for the chromatin in the off state. You can see again that there are more interactions in the off state than in the on state. And the highest interaction strength that we get for this particular gene region is about 3 kBt. And then we can compute the corresponding 3D organization of the chromatin, which is, in this case, on the on state is more open, and in the off state, the chromatin is more folded and more like spherical. So you can see the details in Kiran's paper. So these are the typical snapshots that we get. And once we have the snapshots, we can ask various quantities, like what are the scaling relation between, for example, what is the mean 3D distance versus genomic distance. So what is plotted here is the mean 3D distance between different segments I and j as a function of their genomic distance. And as a control, we have a self-voiding walk polymer, which we expect to have a 0.6 exponent, that all of you know. But for this, in the off state, the exponent will be closer to the close packing limit, so that it's closer to 0.38, and you get a curve like this. And you can see that there is already a spread, which is and there is no spread for the self-voiding walk, suggesting that the spread comes from the heterogeneous interaction. And these dots are experimental data from this group, which is published recently. So the experimental data also has the spreads. So without any fitting parameter, this, once we get the epsilon from this inverse Brownian dynamics, this slope naturally comes out, and it is very much comparable to this experimental data. And then we can ask other scaling relations. For example, what is the contact probability versus 3D distance scaling? For example, if you think of an ideal chain, the looping probability, for example, scales as L power minus 3/2, where L is the contour length between two different regions. And the average 3D distance for an ideal chain R square goes like L. And combining this, you can say that the 3D distance goes like contact probability power minus 1/3. This is for an ideal chain. Then you can ask, what is this relation for a real chromatin chain? And for our simulations can tell what is this relation. And here is what we get from our simulation. So what is in the x-axis is the contact probability, that is the input. And for a given contact probability, what is the 3D distance? That's the average 3D distance is the question. The y-axis is the mean average 3D distance. So for example, if you take contact probability 10 power minus 1, what you see is that there are many different average distances possible. It is not just one average 3D distance. There is a spread in this data. And this average 3D distance would depend on how far they are along the contour. So blue dots, the color bar here represents the distance along the contour. So if you take two regions which are close to each other, their mean 3D distance is smaller. And if you take faraway regions, of course, the mean 3D distance is more. So it is, you cannot describe this with a single power law. People used to assume that, okay, once you know the contact probability, we can fit some power law, or there would be some power law that would exactly tell you what is the mean 3D distance. But it is not a simple power law. There is a spread, and therefore the heterogeneity would play a role in deciding the 3D distance, is something that we find out from our work. And similarly, one can also compute for the different cell types. Here, for example, you can see that the power law is -1/4, 1/3 for the random chain, and it's more close packed than 1/3, so it's 1/4. And here is 1/3.5 for the on stage, is closer to the ideal random chain. Okay, now average may not tell the whole story, so we can compute the distributions. So this is the 3D the distribution of 3D distances, like 4 pi r square P of r. And what you see is that, so you take, for example, two segments, 5 and 30, 6, 31, 11, 36. So you can take many different segments. They are 25 monomers away, and then ask what is their P of r, what is their distribution of distances. And if the interaction is very strong, you will see a second peak here at the early. And if the interaction is very small, it will be just a single peak distribution. Then you can ask a different question, that if you take a segment 5 and 30, and if you know the interaction strength between those two segments as 2.09, does this interaction strength alone, will determine everything, or will interaction between other segments also decide the distribution of P of Rij between these two segments? And it turns out that it will. So what we did is, the red curve is the contact probability by taking into account all interactions that is in the off state of the chromatin of the gene. And if you take only those interactions which are above 1 kT, you neglect all interactions below 1 kT, interestingly, there is a difference in the distribution. The distribution shifts. So which suggests that even small interactions play a role in folding chromatin. And then you can ask, if I take only the very high interacting strength above 2 kT, how would the distribution look like? The distribution is different. And this is the self-voiding walk, the other extreme. So these are predictions of our model, which suggests that different epigenetic states, you would see different distributions, and that has some implications in chromatin, in biology, including while thinking about enhancer promoter distance and so on and so forth. So to summarize the first part, we have a theory or a simulation for computing 3D organization of the chromatin from the contact map. Experiments measure the contact probability between different segments of chromatin. And what we did is an inverse problem of determining the interaction and the 3D configuration such that the experimentally seen contact probabilities are satisfied. And we computed the configurations of alpha globin gene, and we computed the average 3D distances and distributions and so on. So this is the first part of the story. I have a few more minutes left, so I have a second part of the story, but I can stop here and take questions if you want for the first part, and then if you give me extra time for the second part, I'll do that way, or we can do the questions at the end together. Divjyoti, what do you want?
So if people are not asking questions, let's go ahead.
So
is there anyone, you can unmute yourself and ask your questions right now?
No, my question was like in this 3D organization, this, for instance, there's analytical work on DNA looping based on the WLC model. One can do. So that may help in shedding some analytical light on this kind of problems.
Yeah, those models do not account for the interaction strength between different segments. And as you know, what is the crucial part here is the interaction strength, the epsilon mu news, which are let me go to the model part. So these red bonds, which are the interaction strengths, so those, if you account, that will be very valuable. But I haven't seen any theory that accounts for interaction between different segments of chromatin.
So maybe going beyond that take into consideration these interactions.
Yeah, yeah, that's what it turns out to be useful for
Yeah.
my
Because
model.
in the DNA looping theory, what happens typically is the contact probability peaks around 3 times the persistence length.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. Here, what is the kind of peak location do you see?
So I haven't done contact probability as a function of L
Length,
as a
the
function.
contour length.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there are these interactions, things change. Yeah, but there are some interesting results there. Probably I can tell you in a different context, but I haven't looked at contact probability as a function of length. As a
Yeah,
function.
actually, I have a paper. Maybe I'll share it with you later.
No, I know. So I'm Ranjit. I don't know if we work.
I'm Supurna.
Yeah, so I know your paper. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Ring closure probability.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Ranjit, I had a question. Maybe this is naive.
So
as far as I can see, this is a equilibrium simulation, right? The whole thing, Brownian dynamics.
Yes.
Okay. So if that is the case, then couldn't you, in principle, write down a free energy for the all the degrees of freedom of the particles, and then ask for the optimum of that free energy and keep that as a function of the interaction parameters, and then fit it rather than doing a full microscopic simulation? I mean, you may have to do the optimization also numerically. You can't do the problem analytically.
But how would you write down a free energy? I mean,
I mean, this is an equilibrium problem. You know all the potentials.
No, we do not know potential. We only know what we want to do is that known the contact probability, we want to compute so the only thing we know is the contact probability. This is experiment.
No, I'm saying you know the form of the potential. You know the form of the
function
potential.
of
I think
form,
you're
right?
trying to parameterize
the form of the potential. Yes. Yes. Yeah. That we know. Yeah.
I mean, that might be faster. Maybe that's a naive thing. Maybe that's faster than doing the full-blown Brownian dynamic simulation.
Yeah, I don't know how to do this. Probably it is possible. Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Ranjit. This is Sean here. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks. It's a very nice talk. So following up on maybe Vijay's question, so if this is all equilibrium, would you actually be able to get out the A and B domains out of these simulations? Because my understanding was those were mainly sort of non-equilibrium type driven stuff, right?
Yeah, so this is, see, the Brownian dynamic simulation, what we did is in principle, non-equilibrium stuff also can be simulated using this. But here what I'm saying is that given the interaction strength, we are calculating the steady state contact probability. So as far as the steady state structures are concerned, what matters is just the strength of the interaction. But the dynamics would be non-equilibrium, yes. That's one part. The second part is the domains. We would get, for example, the epsilon values is what we get out of the simulation. We would see two kinds of epsilons probably, like very high ones and low ones, which might suggest something about two domains, which I haven't looked at. Actually, it's an interesting thought that you had. One could look at what are is any information about these domains emerge.
Right.
These epsilons. We have only looked at this one domain, alpha globin region.
Okay,
but if you look at the whole genome, one might see different A and B compartments, epsilons corresponding to A and B compartments emerging from these simulations.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Ranjit, I have a question. This is Vanita.
Yeah.
So you have completely modeled the entire chromatin as a bead spring model.
Yes.
So can you just a little bit explain about that? Because there are hydrogen bonds between the DNA. Above all, the DNA, the interaction between the histone and DNA, I mean, there are 14 contact points, and the histone is interacting with the DNA in terms of, through hydrogen bonds and electrostatic interactions. So don't you think it's a kind of complete severe approximation?
Yeah, so this is a much more coarse-grained level. We have also done in a different context detailed modeling, but this is a much more coarse-grained level. So this here, the one bead, 10 kilobase of chromatin. So we just say that 10 kb of chromatin can be thought of as one bead. So this is a coarse graining procedure. So we follow that coarse graining procedure. This is a very coarse grained model. we have also done, which I was about to have a couple of slides below this. If you zoom in here, what would you see? You would see all these nucleosomes and bending angles and so on and so forth. So we have done a lot of work on what will you see if you zoom in into one of these beads, what kind of structures one would see. And there, whatever you said, everything will become important, and including electrostatic interactions and so on and so forth. So we have some detailed studies on what will it come out if we account for all these interactions.
Okay, it's
But
kind of
that will be
complete.
at a very local level, and you can still coarse grain to a larger level. So this would be about a kb or a chromatin. There, what 10 kb is taken as 1B.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions? So, if there are no more
Yeah,
questions,
let's continue.
yeah. So I just wanted to say that we have other work on details of it, which I wouldn't say, which one can see done by another PhD student, Gaurav. And I'll now switch gears and talk about a different problem, which is what can we say about copying information, the epigenetic information, which is the information beyond the genetic code, which is hidden in chromatin. And while during cell division, what can we say about copying this information? So as you all know, when the cells divide, DNA is copied, but the information, the epigenetic information, what happens to this information? So during replication, the process of copying DNA, the whole chromatin is disassembled. And after replication, the chromatin has to assemble back. So how do you assemble back the chromatin once it is completely disassembled? Because there is some information encoded buried in chromatin on how and when to read genes and so on and so forth. So the question is about reassembling chromatin after replication. So how do you assemble the nucleosomes back right at the right location after replication is an interesting question that we did sometime. A part of this work we did with Tripti, when she was in Mumbai with Dibyendu, and we can read the details of this. But even if you assemble the nucleosomes back, there is another question, which is each of these nucleosomes have some chemical marks. For example, the stars shown here are some kind of chemical marks, acetylations or methylations, and some of them will not have this mark where you do not see the star. So there is a pattern of chemical marks along the one-dimensional contour of the DNA or the chromatin if you go along the nucleosomes. And this sequence of this modification, this pattern, encodes some information on how to fold chromatin. To be precise, this epsilon that we talked about, that would be decided essentially by this kind of patterns and this kind of marks, chemical marks, and the interactions between proteins and so on and so forth. So what is the pattern of this chemical modification along the nucleosome, and how do you copy that information when the cell divides is an interesting question. If you look at experiments, this is one of such flags. So H3K27Me3 is a chemical modification on histone 3, 3 methyl marks. And if you look at a population average data of this, what you would get is something seen here on chromosome 1. And in the single cell level, you can imagine wherever there is a peak, there is a modification, there is a star. And wherever there is a trough, you can imagine there is no modifications like a 0. So you can imagine somewhat like a binary, 1 or 0, there is a star or there is no star at the single cell level. And if you average over a population, you would get a pattern like this. So this is what one gets from experimental data. Now, the question is, this information, how do you copy, and what happens to this information during cell division? What is known is that soon after replication, the information is somehow copied. So there are how exactly it's copied is still a puzzle. So, but it is experimentally seen. For example, this recent paper in 2018 and 2019 shows that experimentally showed that this information, this pattern is pretty well copied soon after replication. So now we have some thought on how potentially plausibly one could copy. So to do that, to tell that, let me quickly tell you what happens to the histones during replications. So what happens to nucleosomes during replication is that, so imagine this is the mother chromatin and these are 2 daughter chromatins. So there are 4 red nucleosomes, and these 4 red nucleosomes are randomly distributed between the 2 daughter chromatins. So you can toss a coin, take a nucleosome, toss a coin and decide which one this would go to. So half of, roughly on an average, half would be here and half would be here. And the blue nucleosomes are newly synthesized histones, so they may not have all the chemical marks. So you have half the histones in any daughter chromatin, any new DNA, new chromatin, you will have half nucleosome which has old chemical marks and half nucleosomes which do not have the old chemical marks. So you have only each chromatin after replication will only have half the information, and you have to reconstruct the full information from half information. So that is the question, how do they do it? And mathematically you can think of this as, so if you think of as a binary pattern 1 and 0s, there is modification 1, there is no modification 0. And during replication, many of this 1 would go to another strand. So one daughter chromatin will have many more zeros. And it can be shown that this is equivalent to taking a sequence of 1s and 0s M and dotting with a random binary sequence Z. And then what you get is the daughter sequence, which is in the middle sequence. And the question is, from this daughter sequence, how do we reconstruct this mother-like sequence M hat? And that is the question that we are interested in. So the question is, given a daughter chromatin, histone modification sequence D, how can a cell reconstruct a mother-like modification pattern? That is the question. And reconstructing back sequences from noisy version of the sequence is a well-known problem in communication theory or information theory. So I collaborated with my colleague in the electrical engineering department, Shibiraj Pillai, and Nitya, who is a postdoc working with me and Shibi, did this work. So what we did is that we used some algorithms known in communication theory to reconstruct this information back. So known some statistical information about this mother chromatin. What can these, so there are a bunch of algorithms, and what is the best known algorithm can do is the question what we asked. And what is the statistical information that the mother chromatin has? So let us assume to begin with, mother chromatin is like a Markov chain of order 1. So in the Markov chain, we have two parameters, alpha and beta, where alpha is the probability of having 1 followed by 1, and beta is the probability of finding 0 followed by 0. And we have 1 minus alpha and 1 minus beta is the probabilities of flipping from 1 to 0 and 0 to 1 respectively. So once you know these two parameters, and alpha and beta, one can apply something called the map decoding algorithm, which is a well-known algorithm. And I wouldn't go into the details of the algorithm now, which basically does maximizing a conditional probability. So this conditional probability is P of MD, where D1N is the daughter sequence. So given the daughter sequence, we have to find out the mother-like sequence by summing over all possible mother configurations. So that's the idea, and there are algorithms to do this. And then one can get out this M hat, which is the mother-like pattern. And we do that, we apply this algorithm and compute the mother-like pattern. And then you can look at the error in the reconstructed pattern and the original mother pattern, how different they are. And you can define some error, the deviation. And then we can look at these deviations. So this graph is the deviation from the mother pattern, original mother pattern we started with, and the reconstructed mother pattern after the replication and so on and so forth. What would one get? How much error you would get? The error could be would depend on alpha and beta. And for some alpha and beta values, the error is as small as 5%. And some alpha and beta values, it could be as big as 30%. So this is what the best algorithm known in the field can do of reconstructing. And it is an interesting question that can enzymes do better than the best known algorithms in the field of information theory or not? But what is one would naively think is that even this kind of map decoding algorithm is probably too complex for simple enzymes to figure out and do, because there's a lot of computations, and even it takes a few days for some computer to do. So can there be a simpler algorithm than the map decoding algorithm is a question. And what we found is that we can show that in a certain biologically relevant parameter regime of alpha and beta, the map decoding algorithm simplifies to a very simple process, which is the following. Imagine this sequence of information 1s and 0s. What enzymes have to do is a very simple thing. You find out islands of a certain size. Let us say islands of size 3 or smaller. So whatever these red dots are islands of zeros of size 3 or smaller. Enzymes have to find out such small islands which do not have these modifications and just fill that simply with modifications. If you do this simple process, we show that this is exactly equal to the map decoding algorithm in certain parameter regime, and it turns out that those parameter regimes are biologically relevant parameter regime. So we show that the maps recording algorithm, which is slightly complex algorithm, simplifies to something very simple in this biologically relevant regime. So we can do this given an alpha and beta. We can come. So what we plotted here is the mean error as a function of this threshold. So I can take any value here. I took 3 here, but I can say that I take a KT, a threshold number, and I fill all islands below that threshold number. So that's what threshold number is varied. So I fill all islands below 1, all islands below 2. And then each of this I do, and I compute the mean error, and I see that there is a minimum. So there is an optimal threshold number at which the error would be minimum. If you go either way, if you fill too many or if you fill too less, then this error would be large. And one can compute this threshold value using analytical methods. And the details can be read in this paper, which is now in arXiv. And so this is what we find in our work, and we apply now this to certain experimental data. This is experimental data for ACE3K27ME3 in certain HeLa cells. And this is the mother sequence pattern which is known in the steady state. We take this pattern, make it to a binary sequence, and we do the cell division like process, replication like process on a computer, and then we fill this using this method, the threshold filling method, and we can choose whatever threshold we want, and we see that there is a threshold value of 5 at which the error between mother and daughter is minimum. So when KT is 5, the error is only 14%. That's the best this can do, and that's the best any algorithm can do that we know. And that's what the best reconstruction possible. And this is potentially enzymes can do this, and the pattern looks quite similar to the mother pattern. So this is the summary of, so our K-filling algorithm, the algorithm that fills K, islands of size K, can reconstruct experimentally observed patterns by starting with the experimentally known mother sequence. So that is the bottom line of our work. So to summarize, given partial information about histone modifications after replication, how do cells reconstruct the complete information is the question. What can a machine do is something we asked. And map decoding algorithm, which is, we show that this map decoding algorithm is equivalent to filling of islands of size 0 with a particular size. And this is simple enough for enzymes to execute, plausible that enzymes can do this. And it can reconstruct the experimental data reasonably well. So that's the summary of the second part. And I would like to thank my collaborators and the funding from DST and DBT and IIT Bombay. And I'll be happy to take questions.
Hi, Ranjit. This is Shaun here once again. Thanks. This is super interesting, actually. So a quick question. So there is this idea of the smart copying model, right? Where you have these readers and copiers and readers. So is what you are suggesting, is that in some way similar or different? And can you just...
Yeah. So there are these readers and writers, they would, so for example, this is again a much more coarse grain level. So what readers and writers have to do is the readers have to identify these zeros.
Right.
And find out an island of this, and just writers have to fill it.
Right.
So there has to be, so the process that we say, some cooperative process has to happen. And I don't know, I would speculate that probably readers are evolved to find out some optimal number of islands. There are many readers for each modification, different readers and so on and so forth. So maybe they are evolved. This is something which I am interested to find out in future, whether are they actually, there's some evolutionary thing, can I look at, are they evolved to optimally fill certain threshold number or not?
I see. Okay, interesting.
So,
yeah, if you
any more
have
questions? I don't see any questions. I don't see any questions in the chat. Is there anyone who can mute?
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Yes.
There are some of these ideas that you need some sort of long range interactions, right?
Yeah.
So if you, but in your model, you have, this is a purely Markov model. It's a nearest neighbor kind of these alpha betas, right?
Yeah. So yeah, this is an interesting question. So there are two arguments. So you might be saying about this Dodd et al. Model. I don't know if the
Yeah, exactly.
right? So yeah, so they argued that you need a long range interaction, and so what we find is that you don't need two long range interactions. You need something like a KT. So this is the long range you would need, is what now my understanding is. So you need, indeed, you need to fill 3 or above, or some number or above, KT or above, or B. So this is the long range you need, is what I would argue. KT is you don't need beyond that. I have some other work to show that if you have beyond it, everything will becomes one, and you wouldn't get these patterns, because you don't want everything to mix, right?
Right, absolutely.
So the work of Dodd is very, very limited in vitro kind of work, where they do not really reproduce the exact patterns seen in the experimental data. They just say that to fill, you need long range interaction, but you don't need long range interaction beyond the pattern itself. If you have it, every pattern will be the same.
I see. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
So I would argue that what you need is this KT is the range of long range interaction that you need. So we have another work which we are doing, which would tell this a little bit more clearly.
So maybe for follow-up, if I have a very quick follow-up. So is it actually known that between the mother and daughter, the exact pattern is replicated, or is it that on average, the patterns are replicated in a population of cells?
So what is known is this data that I showed. So this is a very recent data. Let me just go back. Yeah, this is 2 labs, Anya Groth and Danny Reinberg's lab. What they showed is that soon after replication, they look at time-dependent manner, half an hour, 1 hour, some time-dependent manner. They look at how close they are. So it's of course a population average. There is no single cell data. This is all we have at the moment.
So actually, there are some new single cell data sets. If you're interested, I can send you some reference.
I'll be interested. Yes.
Yeah, where they actually looked at it through the cell cycle as well. So it is cell cycle resolved, single cell data sets.
Okay. We should chat after this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So we already have spilled over the time. So is there anyone? If not, these are very interesting and wonderful talk, Ranjit.
Thank you, Deepjyoti.
Yeah. So this concludes the first session in the morning, I think.
Thanks, Ranjit. Thanks, Deepjyoti.
Thank you for organizing this very nice meeting.
Thank you.